Hey there, lovely people. Welcome back to our channel. We're stoked to have you here and can't wait to dive into some deep solitude vibes. Today, we're gonna chat about solo living, its roots, those cool cats who championed it, and its spiritual side. Are you ready? All right, let's get right into it. Let's turn back the clock and talk origins first. It might seem like solo living is a modern trend, right? Not even close, man. Our ancestors were into the solitude thing way before it was cool. In ancient societies, people from different walks of life would choose to live alone for various reasons: meditation, introspection, self-discovery. It could be because they were monks, philosophers, or they just wanted some peace and quiet. Can you blame them? Next, let's talk about the big names. Ever heard of philosophers like Epicurus and Socrates? They both valued peace and solitude above all else. Epicurus preached a life of modesty and quiet introspection, while Socrates believed wisdom came from continuous self-examination. And we can't forget about old buddy Walden. I mean, Henry David Thoreau, duh. He lived alone by Walden Pond for 2 years and even wrote a book about it. These folks truly champion the idea that venturing alone isn't lonely, but rather a journey of self-rediscovery. Now on to the spiritual connection. Being alone has always held a key place in religious and spiritual practices. Let's take Buddhism, for example. Monks, right? They opt for solitude to practice mindfulness and achieve enlightenment. Christianity also has hermits who retreat from society for spiritual growth. It's about having the time and space for reflection and connection with that greater power. And there we have it. Makes you think about solitude from a different perspective, doesn't it? Like, it's not just about being away from the bustle of the city. It's about you, about getting to know yourself, finding peace, and even connecting with a higher power. Cozying up to solitude doesn't seem all that frightful now, does it? The idea of intentionally living solo, like really solo out in the wild and away from the hustle bustle, it can seem a little out there for some, right? But it's not actually a new phenomenon. In the past, living alone in remote areas was more about survival necessity. Think a lone hunter setting up camp in the wild or a lone sailor navigating the ocean, but now it's evolved. It has become a chosen lifestyle. Now, sit back and imagine a forest. Your nearest neighbor is miles away and it's just you, the trees, and the open sky. This was actually the dream of many thinkers during the Enlightenment era. These brainiacs emphasized solitude as a powerful experience that could help us grow intellectually and spiritually. They saw value in unplugging, tuning out the chatter, and honing in on the inner self. So what's changed now? One word: industrialization. The Industrial Revolution gave birth to cities, factories, and machinery. Oh my! Everyone was expected to be parts of this giant, noisy machine. It changed how we lived and worked, but it also made the idea of solitude even more attractive. In a world that was increasingly noisy and crowded, the quiet and space offered by solo living seemed like a sanctuary.
People began to long for a simpler life, to seek serenity in solitude and reconnect with nature, away from the constant hum of industry.
And with today's digital age, the longing for such silent retreat has only grown stronger. So, solo living isn't just about survival or escapism. It's about seeking a life that's true to oneself, a place where one can hear their own thoughts above all the rest of the world's noise. And you know what? That isn't a bad choice to make. Living solo might have seemed a little off to folks once upon a time, like some sort of oddball move akin to running off and joining the circus. Many saw it as a manifestation of anti-social tendencies or an escape from responsibilities. Well, you don't like people? They'd ask incredulously, eyebrows raised higher than the prices at the movies these days. Fast forward to now, and people aren't just warming up to the idea, they're downright embracing it. I reckon you'd find plenty who'd swap their daily 9-to-5 grind for the peace and quiet of living alone. It really is wild how much attitudes have changed over the years, whereas it used to be out of the norm. Now you've got folks writing bestsellers about the beauty of solitary living and praising its benefits for self-discovery and personal growth. But as in every coin toss, heads and tails don't look quite the same. Different cultures perceive solo living differently, each with their unique lenses. In some places, particularly Western societies, it's seen as independence and self-sufficiency, a sign the youngster's all grown up and ready to take on the world. In others, living alone might get you the hairy eyeball, if you catch my drift. This is especially true in more community-centered societies where interdependence and family bonds are the status quo. Yet, there's also a beautiful commonality across cultures: the loner or recluse archetype. You know, the wise sage living on the top of a mountain, the intrepid explorer in a far-off land, or the hermit in the midst of untouched nature. These romanticized figures are often praised for their strength and wisdom, a hint that regardless of where we come from, we have a shared understanding of the transformative power of solitude. So whether you're a city dweller craving the call of the wild, or just enjoy the peace and quiet of your own company, flying solo ain't as strange as it seems.
Dude, have you ever noticed how books and movies often portray characters living solo or cherishing solitude?
It's like an intriguing theme in literature and art. Take Henry David Thoreau's Walden, for instance, a classic text where the guy ditches society to be a hermit in the woods and mulls over life, freedom, and personal growth. Talk about taking self-isolation to a whole new level. Solitude brings along a certain romanticism in these narratives, doesn't it? Now, while we may love our Friday night hangouts, imagine the tranquility, self-awareness, and peace that artists and writers frequently associate with solo living. It can be quite alluring. Let's take another dug in the memory lane tour. Tops on the chart would be Into the Wild. The novel by John Krakauer, eventually made into a movie, is a real-life inspired story of Christopher McCandless, a young man who, fed up of materialistic society, literally goes into the Alaskan wild to live alone. That's your classic example of choosing solitude as a path to find meaning. It's as if being alone in nature purges the soul and illuminates the mind, man. Thinking about solitude as an artistic and creative catalyst, it's quite a deal. A little bit of solitary pondering has always been the artist's friend. Hey? And if you are wondering, isolation isn't all gloom. It can whip up a creative rampage. Virginia Woolf, Ernest Hemingway, Beethoven, so many of them found their creative ethos in solitude. They weren't just brewing up dramas or symphonies, but also cultivating resilience, understanding themselves better in the process. So while it's fun to be around people, indulging in solitude every now and then might not be a bad idea, eh? Who knows? You might end up painting your masterpiece or writing a best-selling novel while you're at it. So your buddy decides one day to be a modern-day hermit, going off-grid and all. And you thought maybe he lost it, right? Not really. Hear me out. There's a pretty intriguing spike these days of folks not simply taking short camping trips, but fully betting on a secluded lifestyle in nature. That's right, we've got people turning their backs on Wi-Fi signals and cozy city hustle to reunite with the pure embrace of Mother Nature. Ever of off-grid living? That's it. This isn't about switching careers or decluttering an apartment mate. We're talking a total shift of gears, swapping concrete jungles for real ones, leaving the fast lane for the slow, peaceful path of solitude. Why, you ask? Well, it's not rocket science. It's about the mind and the heart. Living in solitude or close to nature can be a radical form of therapy, freeing the mind and soothing the soul, you know? It's a kind of reconnection to the primal, unsullied self, away from the pollution of our overstimulated world. Now, to flesh this out a bit, let's look at some stellar examples. Have you ever heard the name Christopher Knight? Knight lived alone in the Maine woods for nearly 30 years. Yeah, that's not a typo. 30. Zero human contact, zero flashy gadgets. This bloke survived by simply adapting to his environment and making his peace with solitude. And believe it or not, some people are following suit, chasing an elusive sense of peace that conventional living can often elude. Think of it, no deadlines, no nagging bosses, just you, a couple of chirping birds, a star-studded sky for company. Doesn't sound too shabby, eh? Experiencing loneliness could be tough, right? But solitude, it's a whole other league. It throws you onto the open field of self-exploration, a chance to stand face with your inner self. So next time you find your mind wandering towards a peaceful river cabin or a cozy forest lodge, you're not alone. It's a path more and more people are choosing, sort of seclusion with purpose, living alone for an extended period, especially somewhere secluded like nature. Man, that's one heck of a ride and emotional roller coaster for sure. This solitude gig isn't all rainbows and butterflies, alone with your thoughts. Sometimes the silence can get too loud. The mind begins to play tricks on you, and you start feeling nostalgic, sad, or lonely. Some people even land in the pit of depression. Being your own Beth is a tough gig sometimes. And then comes the wave of criticisms and prejudices from folks who just don't get it. You'll hold the title as the eccentric one or the crazy cat lady, even if you don't own a cat. People judge you for breaking the societal norm of let's huddle in packs. Don't let this bother you though. This is your journey, not theirs. But here's the kicker. Living alone for a prolonged period can throw a curveball at your health and well-being. Science says we're wired for connection, so being in isolation can cause physical stress. It's not uncommon to see your sleep get messed up, your exercise routine go down the drain, or your diet do a 180. If you aren't mindful, solitude can have your health waving the white flag. But hey, everything has its pros and cons. Living solo is no different. If you want to experience the rawness of life, it's quite an adventure, a journey into yourself. You'll learn a whole lot about who you really are. Remember to subscribe to the channel and smash that like button if you enjoyed this discussion on living solo. You being here makes my solitude more fun. We can explore this crazy thing called life together. I-O for now.
Don't forget to hit that bell for notifications on the next dose of real talk.